I am Anna Seewald, and this is Authentic Parenting, a podcast about growing ourselves while raising our children. I'm a psychologist, educator, and parent coach. And on this podcast, I explore how you can connect to your authentic self, practice radical self-care, and raise emotionally healthy children. Let's break the cycle of generational trauma for a more peaceful, kind, and compassionate world. Today, Colonoscopy and Cannolis. I am joined by my dear friend, Christy Lorisella. She's a licensed clinical social worker and frequent co-host in my personal episodes. She appeared in one of the most recent episodes, Death and Cupcakes. And oh my, that episode stirred up a lot of emotion and conversation. I am thankful to learn that regardless of my initial hesitation and resistance to making that episode, many people found it helpful and enjoyable. So thank you. I am hoping today's episode will be of use as well, as I am sharing the very practices and tools that I used to get me through my first colonoscopy experience. More than once, I have stated that this podcast has changed my life and that I learned a lot. Well, today I want to share how. Very recently, I went for my first colonoscopy. And if it weren't for the tools and practices that I had learned from the podcast, I don't think my experience would be the same. I mentioned several tools and practices. I also mentioned the appropriate episode number and the name, and I wanted you to know that I will link them up in the show notes for you for easy reference. One practice I forgot to share but mentioned in this episode was holding counsel, and I am going to share that in the intro. I hope it makes sense. Maybe you can listen to the entire episode and then come and re-listen to the intro again. Well, I learned this practice of holding counsel from Dr. Lisa Miller. She's a New York Times bestselling author of The Spiritual Child and The Awakened Brain. She's a professor in the clinical psychology program at Teachers College, Columbia University. I went on a retreat with her and I learned this practice during the retreat, but I am going to read from her book the description of this visualization. She writes in her book that she learned it from someone called Dr. Gary Weaver, and this is called a transcendental visualization exercise. Again, it's called holding counsel. Here it goes. Sit down, close your eyes. Set before you a table. To your table, you may invite anyone, living or deceased, who truly has your best interest in mind. With all of your guests sitting there at your table, ask them if they love you. And now, to your table, invite your higher self, the part of you that is much greater than anything you've done or not done, anything you have or don't have. Ask your eternal higher self if you love you. And now, to your table, invite your higher power, whoever or whatever it is to you. Ask if your higher power loves you. And now, with all of those people sitting there, right now, ask, what do I need to know right now? What do they need to tell me? And that's the end of the practice. I find this practice extremely useful, helpful, enlightening, comforting, emotional at times. I have tried it many times, but I did use during my colonoscopy experience a modified version of it, my own version of it, and it was so helpful. I hope you will give it a try. Thank you for listening. Please enjoy. Christy, thank you so much for joining me today to do this episode.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm happy to be here and I'm looking forward to hearing all about your colonoscopy.
I know. I did a big thing. I lived in fear and anxiety for 2 years because, when my doctor told me I needed to do it, I couldn't bring myself to even think about it. I was so worried and anxious. And that lasted 2 years unnecessarily. Now I recognize that why did I go through it and waited so long? But, you can't do much about it. And I've spoken to so many people, including you. I think you were the last person I spoke to before I scheduled it, correct? When we spoke about colonoscopy, I hadn't yet scheduled it, right?
I don't think so. No, you were trying to muster up the courage to do it.
Yes, for 2 years, this was occupying Christy so much mind space, this worry, this anxiety that I have to do it. I don't want to do it. What if they discover something? And I am going to be truthful and say that on many occasions, I have felt that, oh my gosh, I have cancer. I definitely have cancer. I don't want to discover. And my main worry was the anesthesia part, which I never had anesthesia in my life. I'm an anxious person. I don't want to die. I have health anxieties. I have medical trauma. So all of it made it impossible to even schedule it. But it was a necessity as I have a family history and I had, low iron that wasn't getting high. So they needed to do this. I recognized the importance of it. And remember, you coached me and you told me, I was walking with you and I'm like, I know she's saying everything. I understand cognitively everything you were saying, like the importance of it, why I should consider doing it and all of that. But like emotionally, I just could not. But I think it made an effect after speaking with you, whatever you said. After that, I said, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and schedule it.
That's great. I'd like to think a part of it had to do with me validating your real fears and your history with medical trauma. And, I think that was like a big piece of the puzzle, was kind of like your body remembering that feeling of helplessness, or I don't know. What do you think?
Yes, I think it was important because I had spoken to so many people from my friends group, my neighbors, my book club members, and partly it is a good thing that I did sort of talk about this process and I informed everyone that I need to do this colonoscopy. I don't want to. And interestingly enough, I spoke to a lot of people. I'm a very social person, but I also am vulnerable. I'm not afraid to talk about those kinds of things. And then people offered a lot of advice and shared their experiences, which now looking back was helpful and not helpful, right? Like you learn about other people's fears and bad experiences, and yours is not like that. So there is good thing in that and bad thing. But I had talked to many people and everybody had told me it's okay, it's not a big deal, you'll survive, don't worry about this. But I think because you're a therapist, you know how to approach this. So my suggestion to a listener is, friends and family and other people are helpful, but when it comes to professional help, there's nothing like it. When you get validation and empathy, not everybody has a friend like you, right? So if you do have a friend like Christy, who is really caring and empathetic and has a training, then I think seeking help when you need it, there's no shame in that. That's the first thing I would say. The second thing, the moment I scheduled it, my anxiety vanished. Completely, it was gone. It became concrete. They gave me a date. I chose the date. I remember going to the doctor's office for consultation and I'm like, oh my gosh, today I'm going to choose a date? Oh my gosh. And the date was very close, like it was the following week. But the moment I put it on the calendar, my worry completely dissipated. And I was just living my life. It never once entered into my consciousness, the anxiety, the worry. I knew that it's coming. And it's going to be okay. And that was a big revelation that when we have anxiety, but when we take a concrete action towards it, it's more manageable. It dissipates. It minimizes its power over you. When it's just floating in the air in your mind, it's more worrisome and your anxiety produces more anxiety. I just realized that, wow, that was incredible for me, that revelation.
Well, and I think it's important too to notice that, you said it took you 2 years to make this appointment. And that all that time leading up to it, you were processing it. You weren't ready, and that's okay. I mean, like we want to, show some compassion to ourselves and some understanding that it took you 2 years. I can tell that you feel like kind of a little foolish about it.
Yes, I do.
But if it didn't take you 2 years and you had just snapped your fingers and made the appointment right away, we wouldn't be sitting here recording this podcast either. So it was like, it's interesting because it was like for some reason, it was a journey that you needed to go through.
Oh my goodness. And now, after I finished, I'm like, oh my gosh, if I knew it was this easy, I would have done it. But obviously, I wasn't ready, right? Psychologically, mentally, emotionally, I wasn't ready. And like I said,
well, and I remember I'm like, it's actually kind of nice. You just go to sleep and open your eyes and then it's over. And there's really nothing that I could have said, really, that was going to convince you. You probably heard it from so many people, how they had a really easy, positive experience, but that wasn't what helped you. But I think you're going to share with us today some strategies that you used that helped you along the way.
Yes. And so one of them was, I already mentioned, taking control and scheduling it, right? Making it more concrete. After that, I started saying this mantra to myself. And until the very end, it helped me one step at a time. And I truly believed it and lived it, embodied that. I know like that's a very popular common saying, one step at a time, Anna, one step at a time, Christy. But I truly tuned into that. And I said to myself, this was the first step. I brought myself to the consultation room, one step at a time. Look at my calendar and book the day of it. One step at a time, just go home and be ready for it. And one step at a time, get your medication, one step at a time. It was my guiding mantra. And it helped me to worry about it, but in a more contained way, not to worry about upcoming steps unnecessarily, but it helped me to worry about the current step, one step at a time. I am here in this moment. And what's coming next, I don't know, but let me worry about this step right now. And it helped me tremendously by tuning into it and embodying it and truly believing that this was the step I am in. I guess you can say that's kind of mindfulness, right? Being present and not worrying about the future, catastrophizing and being caught up in this anxiety vortex that is so very common.
Yeah. And also, like, there's also kind of reclaiming your power to that as well. Like, you're feeling so powerless to this big medical procedure that you have all these anxieties about. But like, what you can control is, like you said, each step to get there.
Yes. And another thing was I kept saying to myself, it's all in the mind, Anna. It's all in the mind. Things are not as scary as they seem. It's all in your mind. I was doing a lot of self-coaching during this entire process, and it really helped. I guess I have practiced enough for it to work, right? One of the things I learned in one of the podcast episodes with Ethan Kross, who wrote the book Chatter, and I looked it up. It's episode 294, The Voice in Your Head and How to Harness It. In that episode, well, the book is fantastic. He highlights maybe 36 practices and tools for conquering chatter and harnessing the power of your inner negative voice. And one of them is talking to yourself in a third person. To some people, it may not come naturally, but to me, it does. And when you practice frequently, it works. You believe in it. So I was into practice during this entire process. Anna, everything is going to be great. Don't worry. And one step at a time. Anna, it's all in the mind. Like talking to myself in the third person, it worked really well. And I remember I was in California a few months ago in December in San Francisco. My daughter was sick in a hotel room and I went downstairs to get tea and we were alone. And this hotel is enormous. The corridors leading to the elevator is so long, like you go in circles and circles and circles. And I am really scared of tall buildings, elevators, narrow spaces, right? This like triggers my anxiety. My daughter was in the hotel room. And I never go into an elevator by myself. But I had to because I had to get tea for my daughter. So I said to myself, this is all in the mind. I was coaching myself to just take the elevator, go downstairs, take it back upstairs, walk to the corridor by yourself. I know this sounds silly, but for a person who has fears and worries, this is enormous. And I was walking through the corridor and this panicky feeling came over me. I'm like, oh my gosh, what if this building collapses right now? San Francisco earthquake, it can happen, right? And I just was able to, again, coach myself and say, you know what? What's going to happen? Nothing is going to happen. I was able to talk myself not out of it, but say that this is all in my mind. The mind has such power over our real experience. This is not my experience right now. I am here. I am safe. Yes, it's a narrow, long hallway, but I'm safe. So I was able to do that. And this "it's all in the mind" mantra was, again, one of those helpful ones that guided me through this colonoscopy. Not believing my thoughts, that it's all in my mind. Do not believe everything you think, right? Your real experience, tune into that, what's happening right now. It helped me, navigate this.
Yeah, and I mean, I would add too, I think you mean this, but like it's all in my mind and my body, like I think it's easy for us to kind of like decapitate ourselves and like live so much in our heads, but like also your mind is taking cues from your body and your nervous system too.
True. Yeah. And that brings me to the tools that I used to get me through this experience, right? And most of the tools I learned through doing this podcast, and I will mention specific episodes for the listener, the tools and the appropriate episodes, so that they can use it for themselves. The podcast has been enormously helpful for me in my personal growth journey, and so I'm forever grateful for that. So people had warned me, oh, the prep is the worst part, like this and that. It wasn't. Like my experience was completely different than other people. So take it with a grain of salt what other people say. But I think it's important, before we get to the tools, my doctor's office had sent me this information about colon cancer and some statistics. I just feel like it's important to encourage the listener, if they need to schedule a medical procedure, a diagnostic screening, a colonoscopy, a mammography, or something like that, do it, schedule it, take care of it. Your health is important. You are an active agent in that process. If you need to talk to people like myself or even go to therapy for it, it's important. We need to do that. And especially this colon cancer is so prevalent, right? My doctor's office sent me this note. Did you know that among adults under 50, colorectal cancer is now the leading cause of cancer death in men and the second leading cause in women? I didn't know that. Additionally, the number of colorectal cancer diagnoses in the United States among individuals under 55 years of old has doubled from 1995 to 2019. Now, 1 in 5 colorectal cancers are found in people under age 55. And initiating regular screenings at age 45 or earlier for individuals with symptoms or a family history is imperative. And of course, I have family history. I am almost 50, so more reason to do this. Colon cancer is the third leading cause of cancer deaths overall among men and women in the United States, and on and on. So there is a lot of, alarming statistics out there. So I would encourage my listeners to do it. Don't think twice. If I can do it with my anxious mind and all sorts of traumas and fears, and really, when I came out of that experience, I'm like, oh my gosh, is this what I was scared of? Is this what I was scared of? I should have done it earlier and saved myself the 2 years of anguish and torment, really. But like you said, we go through things, the timing for us there's something to that. The biggest tool that I used was self-compassion, and I really mean it. Maybe in the past I was not so self-compassionate. not maybe, truly, throughout my entire life, right? But I have learned the value of it and I learned how to practice it. And during this entire process, it helped me. Talking to myself kindly, treating myself kindly, giving the things to myself that were important, setting up my environment for success, being there for myself throughout the whole process was so enormously helpful. Looking back, I'm like, wow, that was true self-compassion. Even talking to those people for 2 years was part of self-compassion. I set it up indirectly, a network of support for myself because people already knew that I was going through this experience. So many people contacted me the day before, leading to it, after I was done, before the procedure was texting me and supporting me. And when I was done, I came out, my neighbors, my friends who were in my immediate community, they brought flowers, they called me. I felt truly held and loved, but it wasn't for nothing. I had solicited those people as my army of support, right? If I hadn't told them that I was going through this experience, they would have never known how scared I was. But truly, people were there for me in meaningful and really valued ways that I was like, wow, I was so moved by that. And I tried to internalize that love and receive it, which was also a self-compassionate act.
That's lovely to hear. I'm so glad that was your experience.
Yes, I was not afraid to ask for help. I did ask for help of everyone. But when I went into the colonoscopy surgical center, my husband came with me and then he had to leave, right? Because they take me in already. He can't stay there. And I waited in that waiting room for an hour. Now I'm hungry. I'm getting a headache. I'm getting anxious. My husband is not there already. It's all by myself. And I was just like, I put my hand on my chest like this. I talked to myself in a compassionate way. I was just there for myself, really. And it felt natural. It didn't feel weird that, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Right? Because I have practiced those self-compassion practices and it worked. So I did an episode with Kristen Neff. There are 2 episodes in regards to self-compassion that I want to recommend. One is with Kristen Neff, who is a leading expert in this field. It's episode 160, The Art and Science of Self-Compassion. And I learned a lot of things about self-compassion from that episode. And when I was in the waiting room, this common humanity is part of self-compassion. I was saying, look, Anna, I put my hand on my chest. I was talking kindly to myself and saying, look, all these people are here just like you. They're going through the same experience and they are elderly. Some of them were in wheelchairs and they're, in worse conditions. And I truly was trying to tap into that common humanity and feel that mindful presence and be there for myself. Instead of saying, why are you scared? You're so dumb, being critical, I was really kind. Another episode about self-compassion is episode 320, How to Practice Self-Compassion with Marissa Knox. It's a fantastic episode with lots of practical tools. So when they took me in, that's where my anxiety peaked. When they put me in this gown, the hospital gown, put me on this bed, attached me to the IV and things like that, I'm like, man, this is real. And my first instinct was to get up and run, not be there at all. And in that moment, I told the nurse, I said, look, this may seem weird, but I'm a very scared, nervous person. Could you please stay here with me, talk to me, hold my hand? And I started crying. And she was so kind. Her name was Gail. I would not forget. She was the sweetest person. She talked through everything. She said, don't worry. I do this every 3 years. She has history. She said, I work here, but I still worry. She normalized my experience. She didn't say, oh, come on, it's going to be fine. Or, ignored me or anything. She was so kind.
Aren't nurses so wonderful? I love nurses like that.
I know. I just want to give a shout out to people who work in medical institutions, hospitals, nursing staff. They were all fantastic. And they do this the whole day in this artificially lit environment. There's no windows, there's so much commotion and bad things happen, right? People with emotions, old people. It's just high stakes, high stress environment. And they were kind. So she really was very gentle and eased my anxiety. She measured my blood pressure and she said, "Oh, it's normal. I thought it was going to be high based on how you were talking and acting." So that gave me comfort too. My heart rate was up, but my pressure was normal. So I'm like, okay, Anna, one step at a time. I was again saying all those things. Now they put the IV. Now I'm here. Now this. And she said, "Honey, let's breathe together." And I said, "Oh, I know breathing exercises. I teach to other people. I've done podcasts about this." But when you're in that moment, you forget. And so she helped me do breathing, and she really made me do the breathing. She stayed with me together. We did the breathing, and I felt the comfort of it, my nervous system, regulation. And I felt like, wow, I'm doing this and it's okay. So podcast episode recommendation about breathing, the importance of breath and how to breathe correctly is episode 305, Breathing and Your Health with Patrick McEwen. Highly, highly recommend that episode. And it really helped me. Knowing the breathing exercises and actually doing it was really, really helpful.
And having a coach right there on the spot. That was pretty lucky.
Yes, she was fantastic. She was fantastic. I asked for an extra blanket. I was not scared because I was cold. She gave me a warm blanket and all of that. And I said, "Listen, I'm really scared when I go into the operating room." She said, "I'm not going to be there. It's going to be a different nurse." I said, "No." My alarm went on again. She said, "Don't worry." I said, "Can that nurse hold my hand?" I said, "That's important to me. Like holding my hand is important." She said, "Yes, you can ask her." And I did. And that nurse was also very helpful. And she was pressing my hand so hard. And she was there looking into my eyes while I was going through the anesthesia, which was the scary part for me, but it wasn't scary at all. Honestly, the moment they wheeled me in, I'm like, oh man, like this is really happening. And I told the anesthesia doctor too that I'm scared of this. She's like, "Don't worry, you're not going to die." She was the only person who did not show empathy. She was like, matter of factly. And I'm like, "Woman, you don't know who you're dealing with. I'm really scared." But my doctor, who I met for the first time, she was so empathetic. I cannot describe how important it is for medical professionals to show humanness. It makes a difference. I said to her, I have family, history. My dad had cancer. He died. I don't have my mom. And I'm like crying and like I'm a hot mess. And she's like, "Don't worry, honey. My husband also doesn't have his parents. Both of his parents died. I understand. I always tell my husband, my parents are your parents, but he always says, no, you don't understand." And I looked at her and I said, wow, I do understand how it feels, So she had a chat with me. It was very helpful. So I'm enormously grateful for those people do show humanness in those critical moments, like instead of rushing. So the operating room, maybe already they give you like medication. My anxiety was gone and I was joking already and all of that. And I felt like nauseous a little bit and my eyes closing and I saw vivid dreams. When I opened my eyes, I was in heaven. I was in the recovery room and I'm like, what? Wait, what happened? Where am I? And they gave me this juice and I tried to reach and grab my phone and the nurse says, "What are you doing, Anna?" I said, "I'm not absconding. Don't worry." They thought I'm like exiting the bed. So they kept me there, right? They check your pressure a few times and I was a little dizzy when I came out of it. And then the doctor came. The strangest thing is this part. The doctor came to tell me the results. Everything is normal, nothing to worry about. And the doctor is showing me the pictures and talking about this. And then the doctor is still there, but it's a different conversation. She tells me about her husband again. I said, "How come you chose this profession when you became a medical doctor?" She explained why. She said that her son is becoming a doctor. So look, I'm having this conversation with this doctor. And then I looked at her and I said, "Doctor, is this the second time you just came to me today?" It felt to me as if these conversations were two different occasions, the announcing of the results and her talking about her medical school. I elapsed like time in my mind, in my brain with this. She looked at me and she said, "Honey, that's anesthesia. Don't worry." So that was the most weird experience. Everything went well. I didn't have any symptoms, nothing scary. Everything was great. I went home, I ate, and life was very normal. But one thing occurred to me. One practice I did, which I want to share with you and with the listeners, is important. That's not in the podcast, but I learned from a book. But I forgot to mention that in terms of self-compassion, I made chicken soup for myself the day before. And I said, I'm going to take care of myself every step of the way through this process. I made chicken soup. I ate the nourishing broth. Day of the prep, I went for a beautiful walk early in the day. I think you suggested that do something nice or soak up the sun. It was a beautiful day. I set up what I'm going to watch, a Netflix show through the prep so that I can get through. I set up myself for success, and that is self-compassion. So those were the main things that I did. But when I was on that hospital bed with that nurse, Gail, something came to me, and this is a recurring thing that shows up. And I think I need to process this and deal with this. This image of this hospital room, sort of like a blue-gray walls. I constantly see this when I'm experiencing stress or talk about my dad or something. I see this hospital room, bare walls, a hospital bed, my dad who is suffering with the ventilator on him. And it's just very traumatizing for me. Every time I think of my dad, I think he just suffered and he was alone and he just died because no one was there. And it's very, very alarming for me. That image comes up. I haven't seen my dad. I haven't seen that hospital room. Why do I have this? And it just disturbs me. So after my colonoscopy, because it happened there again, I scheduled a therapy session. I'm going to go to do EMDR about this. While I process my father's death and I am grieving and I'm still grieving, that's a traumatizing thing that pops up and bothers me. And I said to myself, I need to acknowledge it. I need to really look into this. I can't just suppress and forget about it, which I do for the past 2 years. I'm not going to do it anymore.
Well, you have this ability to really notice and kind of slow time down. And I think that comes from being present with yourself and being compassionate with yourself and noticing this. I also think it's really important. I just want to convey to your listeners that these kinds of procedures, and also even when you're just having a healthy pregnancy and going into a hospital potentially, to give birth, if you have any type of previous medical trauma or sexual trauma with any of that, a lot of these things can be brought up. You might not be aware of it, but it's important for you, to find providers that you feel comfortable sharing that with. I know sometimes they ask about previous traumas or sexual assaults or what have you, intakes sometimes, but I do think that it's very easy to be re-traumatized. And I think it's also possible, like with this experience for you, to have kind of a restorative experience, an experience in which you were in a medical setting where the providers were kind and empathetic and you felt safe.
Absolutely. Spot on, Christy. I was thinking about that too. I interviewed this person about trauma. That episode hasn't aired yet, but that's what he said. Like, we know that, right? One of the elements of healing is experiencing what he calls corrective experiences, right? And
corrective emotional experience. Yeah.
So I did go through it and I felt it and I came out more positively on the other end. And now I am not scared. Like, one more step closer to healing in regards with this medical trauma. Yeah, I think it's spot on. Another episode I failed to mention is episode 322, and this is the last one, Why Anxiety is Good for You Even Though It Feels Bad, with Tracy Denise Tiwari. She doesn't share practices per se, but she talks about the power of the mind, reframing anxiety, that we all experience anxiety. It's part of the human condition, how our mind can make it worse or better. And it's a fantastic episode. And I was remembering her words while I was going through that experience. You can empower yourself or disempower yourself through the power of reframing, mindset, and perception. Really, it's such an important aspect that I learned through the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like you were able to really pull everything together, and make it work for you. And I'm so glad that you were able to have a positive experience and, you're on the other side of it. You're, great that you scheduled that session for yourself to explore, this recurring image that you have. And I think you're really onto something. And I think you're really doing all you can to take care of yourself. It's wonderful.
Yeah, which I couldn't do, right? Years ago, I was self-neglecting, abandoning. In the past, I would have not cooked for myself. I would have just sat there and say, no one is there to take care of me and wallow in misery and feel lonely and pitiful. I've been there many, many years, but I think I've come a long way. And I recognized this time that, wow, I really have grown and learned a lot. And I put those tools into practice, and it was truly remarkably helpful. And I want to thank you for being a guide on this path, and many, many other people, friends, neighbors, book club members who I tortured with my questions, and everybody was so kind. The power of human connection, how people are there for you. If you open and share, everybody wants to connect and open and share.
Well, and I think your friends and neighbors and loved ones know that if they were struggling, that they could count on you as well. I mean, I think you have that in your nature that, it's kind of, I'm happy to be there for you, just to be there for you, but also because I know that you would be there for me when I need you.
And another fun thing I learned, this is the last thing. Well, leading to colonoscopy, they ask you to eat a low fiber diet, which was very hard for me because I'm a healthy eater and I aim to eat more fiber in my day. Like, that's my goal. Not eating fruits and vegetables was torture. I'm like, what do you eat? But I was eating like bad things. I'm like, you know what? Let me indulge. I ate so many bad things that I normally don't eat. And then what I recognized was I was always hungry no matter how much I ate bad foods, carbs and pastas and bagels and, crackers and things of this nature. And I was craving more food.
I just want to say, Anna, those aren't bad foods.
No, no, no.
Okay, those aren't bad foods, but they're low fiber foods. Okay.
Low fiber foods, not nutritious food. So I realized
not nutrient dense. They are not nutrient dense.
They're not nutrient dense, but when you eat, you crave more, and want to eat bad foods like sugars. And I was like, and my daughter commented, she's like, Mom, she's like, what happened to you? Like, you want to eat? I'm like, let's go out and I want to order this and I want to eat this. Like, it makes you want to eat more, crave more, and crave sugary, bad junk foods. I recognize that. I never felt that.
You.
And I'm like, wow, this is like people, this is like you become powerless.
Yeah.
Basically, like you can't control that, And so it's not people's fault for not eating healthy. Do you know what I mean? It's not like it's a willpower. When the society is set up in a way that you consume, poorly because you don't have money, it's convenience food, you eat just pizza. I ate one whole pizza one of the days, one entire pizza by myself. Do you know what I mean? And I'm like, wow, I can say so much about the food and stuff. And I was foggy. I couldn't function very well. My mood was very bad. And my mood is normally great because I try to eat healthy. I exercise, I consume enough protein. I try to watch what I eat. And that whole week was like, I was like, wow, I feel the effects of not eating well on my mental and physical health and my mood. Definitely felt that. Yeah. What else? And you had your colonoscopy, right? So what was your experience like? Do you want to say a couple of words? Did you have fears and anxieties like me?
At the time, yeah, it was during COVID and I was having some symptoms and I talked to my doctor and, he said, I just get it checked out. We'll get it checked out. Go for a colonoscopy. I was nervous. Obviously, you can think the worst and, oh my gosh, I hope they don't find anything. For me, the prep was not good. It wasn't, for whatever reason, I had a really bad headache and that was the most difficult part of it, I think, for me. I went into it nervous about the anesthesia too, but I remember in the surgery center, everybody was so kind and sweet. And the anesthesiologist was he was kind of a comedian and he was like, okay, you're on the beach. What kind of drink do you want? Do you want pina colada? And then like, that's the last thing I remember. And then like, I fell asleep and woke up and it was over. And I was so grateful. And obviously, I got a clean bill of health. And I think something funny that people don't anticipate or expect is when you're the colonoscopy, your body has a lot of like air in it. And they put you in this room with maybe curtains or something. And there's all other people in the room. And everybody is passing gas. And it's just so hilarious to hear like a bunch of like random strangers like farting in a room. I just think that that's like a kind of a funny way to end such a stressful such a stressful procedure.
Yeah. A group fireworks. Yeah. I know it's funny how everybody is behind the curtain and you hear everybody's there. I didn't experience the gas part. You had warned me about that and I was waiting for it.
I don't know. Maybe they've improved the procedure.
Maybe they've improved whatever. Yeah, it's like very interesting. Yeah.
That's just a warning that it can happen.
It definitely, yeah, I've heard that warning too. And the prep, like they tell you that there is the tablets and there is the liquid. They gave me the tablets, which was easy, but I have a hard time swallowing pills. And they give you 24 tablets to swallow. So what I did was I crushed them all and I drank it with a spoon. And you have to time it and all of that. And my daughter was there. And one step at a time, obviously, I don't know if I take one tablet, what's going to happen.
You have to take them all at one time or pace them out over a period of
It's like you take 12 at a time, pacing 1 minute, sort of. Within like 20 minutes, you take 12 and then you wait and then you do the round 2. I don't know how to swallow a pill. I always choke and that kind of stuff. But my daughter was there. I'm like, Ella, can you stand next to me while I swallow the first pill? She's like, Mom, nothing is going to happen. Because she's taking chemistry in school, she's reading. She's like, don't worry. I am reading. This is nitrate, blah, blah, blah. It's like nothing scary in this competition. And sure enough, I was alive. My biggest worry was I may stay hungry. I may pass out. I may not have enough energy to withstand being hungry for a day and a half. But honestly, because of the chicken broth that I made, it sustained me. And I had a lot of liquids and stuff like that. So I was not hungry. Even the second day, I was developing a headache the second day already, but I was not hungry. And I was craving of Greek food because I was watching my fat big Greek wedding during the prep. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to eat Greek food so badly. I want food. I was like craving food. And during my anesthesia, they asked me, just imagine the food that you're going to eat after this. And I'm like, Greek food. And I just, went under. They didn't hear the answer. Yeah. So the important thing is for the listener, my dear listener, if you need to take care of something medical, do not postpone it. As parents, I know very well we're very good at scheduling and taking our children to doctor's appointments, right? But when it comes to us, we're not so good. We do not take care of ourselves. And being there for yourself is a self-compassionate act. It begins with that. Yes, maybe we have trauma. Our parents didn't care for us. They were neglectful. They were not there for us. And that can perpetuate, right, in our adult life. But we can break that pattern by being there for ourselves and giving the things that we need. And I am very proud of myself that I did this quote unquote hard thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. And for those of us, I have to say, my parents weren't perfect, but I have to say that I had an amazing pediatrician and an amazing dentist growing up, a pediatric dentist. And so I think because of that, I did not have a lot of the anxiety around health. I did wind up having somewhat traumatic birth experience when I gave birth to my son, and that kind of shifted things for me. But I did want to say that, like, if you're feeling uncomfortable about a procedure, maybe a part of it is the provider as well. Maybe you need to look for a new provider. Look at all the pieces. It might be an internal thing. It also, maybe a part of it is also that you don't have enough information or you don't feel safe asking questions. And, I'm forever going to keep reminding people that, like you said at the beginning of the episode, you have to be your own advocate in the healthcare system. And if, something's not working for you, or if a provider is not doing it for you, then find someone else. which I know can be easier said than done with insurance limitations and whatnot, but I think that is really important.
Yes, I agree. And another thing I did choose, they gave me two options. Either do the procedure in this big hospital in my town or this small surgical center that is like 5 minutes walking distance from my home. And I chose the small surgical center because I know if I go to a large hospital, it's already overwhelming. It's too much going on. So knowing yourself, your anxiety, your worries, you can do that too. Exercising that choice, that power, that what's going to help you in this process, right? Maximizing those points. I think it served me. Yeah. Well, thank you for being here, listening patiently and allowing me to share. I hope this was helpful for my listener. I will have links to all the podcast episodes that I mentioned. And what shall we title this episode, Christy? I think you have a good title after our death and cupcakes.
Well, Death and Cupcakes was a big hit for a title, and someone, what was it? It was on the Facebook post, right? And we jokingly considered a title for this episode being Colonoscopies and Cannolis. Another dessert.
Well, you have to bring cannolis to me next time you see me.
I will.
to make it real. Okay. Thank you again. And thank you to the listener for putting up with me and listening to this episode.
Thanks, Anna, for sharing your journey. It's so personal, so important, and I think a lot of listeners will benefit from your honesty. Thank you.